Okay, good afternoon everyone. I've already thanked the organisers and expressed my appreciation and enormous support for this conference, so I won't repeat myself on that. I was invited, as I said before, as chair of our organisation to provide some input to the conference, and I am, of course, deeply honoured to be giving the introductory keynote lecture. Now, when I thought about what to speak about today and the various things that I could present on, what I wanted to talk about in terms of challenges is the challenge of teaching Israel studies. Now, as I'll come to, I come to this from contemplation about my own teaching of Israel studies, from my work as chair of the European Association and thinking about how we promote the teaching of Israel studies, and to talking to a lot of people, eminent people in the field, who've been teaching Israel studies for many years, largely in the US, Israel and the UK, because that's where my experience is coming from. Now, in doing this, it's been a little bit of a journey of reflection for myself, because I think we all find our way into academia by various routes, and quite often it's a very personal set of circumstances that lead us to that generates within us an interest in the subject. And quite often it can be accidental. It can be the place where we're at a particular time, or the people that we work with, or the people that we're inspired by, or our mentors. And if we're lucky enough to have inspirational mentors, then our journey into the work that we do can be quite fulfilling and can be a shared experience. But what happens, I think, is that as we go along our way and we learn what we're doing, and we develop experience, it's incremental. It's not something that we start out with a blueprint of this is how we're going to do this. Quite often we learn in the job, and I've been learning in my job of teaching Israel studies, and in learning in the job of teaching Israel studies, you encounter challenges and you face those challenges and you resolve those challenges and you learn from those challenges and then you move on. And so for me, in giving this keynote lecture, is generated within myself a period of introspection, a period of thinking about my particular journey, and whether or not there is anything there that is of value to other people within the field, and how to provide some sort of framework of understanding of the experience. And the whole experience of academia, our academic engagement, is to construct some sort of framework to place the facts and experiences that we encounter and to generate some sort of understanding. So, I've been struggling in the last couple of weeks since I received Vitelli's invitation to think through this and to work out what it is that my own personal experience and my conversations can bring to some sort of conversation that we can have today. And it is a conversation. And led me, I suppose, initially to thinking about the relationship between Jewish studies and Israel studies. And the relationship between Jewish studies and Israel studies is like, I think, the relationship that you have within a family. You're part of the same family, but you're different, you've got different experiences, you have different ways of understanding the world. You may have shared roots and a great deal in common, but you also have a lot of differences. So there are differences between Israel studies and Jewish studies. So can we have the next slide? So, in thinking about this, I thought maybe we can learn something about the way in which the study of Israel has emerged, where it emerged, and when it emerged, and why. Because we can start from a position that says that Israel is an important state in the world, so we should study it, and why not? Okay, but that doesn't necessarily tell us very much. The growth of the study of Israel as a subject, I'm not going to use the word discipline, we'll get to that, as an area of study really was generated within the United States, within US academia. So that in many ways the thinking about Israel studies and the way in which Israel studies is taught, understood and organised comes a lot from the American experience. So the question that we might ask in the course of this is whether the American experience translates to a European experience, and whether a European experience, particularly a Western European experience, translates to an Eastern European experience, or a Ukrainian experience. How much, in other words, is this designed and limited by its context, by its specific place? You know, how important is place in the development of all of this, and what can we learn from it? A conversation I had with people about our European Association of Israel Studies. People say to me, why is there a European Association of Israel Studies? In 1985, the Association of Israel Studies was formed. It's a big organisation. It has its conferences in America, it has its conferences in Israel, it has connections across the world. Why have a European Association of Israel Studies? And the answer I gave and continue to give is that the experience of teaching Israel in Europe is different from the experience of teaching Israel in North America. And that if we're going to have an association that is helping the teaching of Israel in Europe, then a European association with people who understand Europe and understand the challenges that are different from North America, it's a good reason for having an organisation. So, winding back from that for the moment, I still have to accept that the North American experience is informative and we can learn something from it, and it's important. And I think what I take from looking at the North American experience is that the North American experience of teaching Israel studies, separate from and built upon Jewish studies, was really generated, although the Association for Israel Studies started in 1985, the big growth comes in the 1990s and particularly in the early 2000s. Why, at that time, do we find this enormous energy coming to academia? You know, what can we understand from that? Why do we learn from that? Why did that happen? Now, there is an irony here, because the irony is this, is that the big push for the study of Israel in North America, in America, was very much came as a reaction to the hostility within academia, particularly the Middle East studies environment in the United States. after 2000, the increasing, we can use the word radicalization, but let's just use the word hostility, of the study of Israel on American campuses, of the experience of talking Israel on the American campuses, was the context for the development of Israel studies, the big push for Israel studies in America. And there's something counterintuitive about this. You think that the study is going to be generated by a very friendly environment. In actual fact, the big push came from it being an unfriendly environment. So that's sort of the first point, which I think is quite interesting. How did this generate the study of Israel? Well, if you talk to, I spoke to many people who were involved in this period of the development of Israel studies. And what we have is we have donors, we have benefactors within America, particularly within the American Jewish community. So the push for the development of Israel studies on American campuses becomes financed particularly by very wealthy American donors who fund the teaching of Jewish studies. And why are they funding the teaching of Jewish studies? Because Israel is important to them, yes, but also because of their concern for the experience of the American Jewish community on campus, for the experience of their children. Which takes us to the idea of Jewish identity in America and the relationship between Jewish identity and Israel. And in many ways, within America, we're talking about a secular Jewish identity. And the two pillars of the secular Jewish identity are remembering the Holocaust and supporting Israel. Israel and the Holocaust. So you have donors who are concerned that their children of their communities are going to their educational institutions. There's a hostile understanding of Israel that impacts on an American Jewish identity at the student level. So you have the money coming in through this direction. You have an enormous build-up of chairs. You have Israel studies finding a place within the American institutions. So the question that was then being asked at that time is, where is the natural home within the academy for the study of Israel? Is it in the Middle East Studies department? Is it in politics? Is it where in the humanities is it? Generally, the answer tended to be that the study of Israel was located within Jewish studies. Comes as no surprise. Not just because of the clear connections between the subject matter, but also because it was felt that the departments of Jewish studies were a more comfortable, a more welcoming home for the study of Israel. And certainly the donors who perceived the reason for doing this as being hostility within the Middle East Studies departments didn't want to see their money going to hostile departments, even if it was to put the study of Israel in there. If you're going to give money to someone, give money to people who like you, not people who don't like you, is the argument. So we have the development, particularly within North America, of the study of Israel in that way. At the same time, there is an availability that is coming to the discipline of scholarship and material, particularly from Israel. You've got something to teach. In the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, there is within the Israeli Academy a sort of inward-looking examination of Israeli society. You get groundbreaking research coming out, particularly from the University of Haifa and the top universities within Israel. Israel has got as we all know, enormously respectable academic institutions. They've got world rankings, they've got top universities. Now, this is not something to forget about. This is a source of scholarship. And this source of scholarship within Israel that examines itself, particularly from the late 1980s onwards, with the new historians, people like, so I've got on there, Benny Morris, Avi Schlein, Ilan Pappen, Gershon Shafir. These are historians, sociologists, who take a very, very sophisticated look at Israeli society. So if you're going to teach Israel studies, you've got coming out of Israel these guys, plus a very, very great number of other eminent scholars that I haven't put on that list. And I mean no offence to Israeli scholars who are in the room at the moment by just picking out these guys. But what we have is we have partnership in Israel. We have speakers, we have scholars that come over, and the Israeli scholars come over to America in particular, and they take on visiting professorships, and they take on careers in North America, and they bring to the institutions enormous wealth of understanding and scholarship. So there becomes this relationship between the American Academy, the Israeli Academy, the American donors, and let's not forget the students as well. And there is an enormous interest, particularly within America, in Israel, among students. And it becomes apparent that this is not limited in any way to Jewish students. If we speak to people who are teaching in many institutions in America, particularly if they're teaching outside the Jewish Studies department, you find an enormous number of students who are interested, who've never been to Israel, aren't Jewish, so on and so forth. So it's what we then have is there is a spread also to Europe. Again, there's a similar dynamic that goes on in the UK. With my experience in the UK, you find in the UK, again, there is a hostile environment for teaching Israel. Israel is seen within the UK, in ways that I'm going to come to in a minute, in an unwelcoming way. And again, we have within the UK, we have donors who are prepared to support the posts within academia. Now, this is a change in the environment within the UK, because the history of further education and universities in the UK was that it was free to the students, it was financed by the state, comes out of taxes. Now, with the growth of the liberal economy, the rolling back, the shrinking of the state, we introduced a system where students pay fees, they take out loans, and that universities are encouraged to seek finance elsewhere. It becomes much more of an economic model that becomes similar to the United States. So what you start to have, again from the early 2000s onwards, is within the UK, you have donors coming into academia and financing posts and financing study. So my experience within the UK is that when I take on a post in 2005, this is 100% externally financed by the EAIS Foundation, who go on to set up 4 or 5 posts within the UK teaching Israel studies. Because, and their ethos is this, is that they are proving a concept. They say to the universities, we will finance these posts for a few years, and then afterwards you will see that they're successful and it will be financed in the normal way. Anyway, so you have this donor relationship in the UK also. So if we have the teaching of a subject that is located in America and in Western Europe in a hostile environment within the academy that is financed to a large extent by external donors, this presents some challenges to the teaching of a subject that you don't encounter elsewhere. So my point here to be examined is, what is that this relationship, this triangular relationship between donors, the institutions, and the state of Israel, shall we say, that presents challenges that are different in other ways. So can we have another slide? So those challenges, I think, I can explain by looking at the players, looking at the actors in this drama that is taking place. So first of all, you have the donors. As I've said, the American perspective, which may have changed, but was certainly informed in the early stage by a concern for the Jewish student experience, not so much in the UK. The donors tend to be more concerned, not with the Jewish student experience, but with the idea of Israel getting a fair hearing. Israel should be taught, say these donors and institutions, in the same way as any other state. Why should it be a hostile environment? Why should it be a political choice to teach Israel? Why is it any different to teaching German studies, or French studies, or American studies, or Japanese studies, or Southeast Asian studies? What's the problem? So the donors say, our aim is to redress the balance. You've got Arab support for teaching Arabic and the parts of the Middle East. What's wrong with us providing some support to have what we call a level playing field? Everybody the same. So you have the donors coming in doing that. Now, this works well, providing that the donors understand their relationship with the academic institutions. The donors have got to give the money and then stand back. It doesn't work if the money is coming from a donation and then they want to be treated like visiting royalty, they want to have a say over who's appointed, they want to be able to object to what's in the curriculum. That doesn't work at all. Donors have got to understand their role within academia as to be able to create a little bit of distance. The second issue is, how does it work with the local communities? Because frequently the local communities take a pride in the teaching of Israel, particularly we see it as a local Jewish community. I was talking to a professor who was teaching Israel in a state institution, I think it was in Texas or somewhere nearby. And she gave a lecture about Israel that was fairly critical of Israeli politics. And she got an enormous amount of critical mail, she got hate mail, because she criticised Israel. And I said, did this come from the Jewish community? And she said, no, there isn't a Jewish community anywhere near our institution. This comes from the evangelical Christian community within America. It's a strange dynamic. So there is this sort of, in some institutions teaching Israel, if you actually say anything that isn't supportive, you're criticised. If you say something that's too supportive, you're also criticised. So there's a dynamic that goes on with the local community. Then there is the relationship with the Israeli state and the state of Israel. And how do we, if we're teaching Israel, relate to the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Israeli government, the Israeli ambassador, Israeli spokespeople that come to the country? Now again, my experience has been that it is necessary, if you're teaching Israel, to maintain a distance from the state. As soon as you are perceived as being the voice person, as being a spokesperson for the State of Israel, then your academic credentials are immediately damaged, and your status within the institution is immediately undermined. So you will find very much, I think, that if you're putting on a conference of Jewish Studies conference, that you may get help, support from the Israeli ambassador or the Israeli representatives, but if you're putting on an Israel conference, the dynamic is very different. Everybody stays a little bit separate from each other. And if I put on an event and it's financed by the State of Israel in any shape or form, I become immediately criticised as not being an academic event, not being a scholarly event, and being an Israel state event. So there is a tension and dynamic, while at the same time we've got to relate to the State of Israel. They provide an enormous amount of resources and information and assistance, but taking their money or badging the event with the Israeli state becomes problematic, particularly within Western European and sure within North America as well. So, what I find is that this tension in which, because of the hostility towards the State of Israel in Western European institutions and American institutions, it generates an enormous amount of student interest. You know, the students want to know more about Israel. It's not Jewish students, an enormous number of non-Jewish students are very interested in Israel. While at the same time, there is a lot of opposition to the teaching of Israel. So there's this balancing going on, which means that certainly in my experience of teaching Israel, you have to be a little bit of a politician. You have to be careful about how you put on things, and you have to balance your speakers. So that when I teach Israel in the UK, I do invite the Israeli ambassador, and the ambassador and I sit down and we have a conversation in front of the students. And it's not an opportunity for the Israeli ambassador to give a speech about how wonderful Israel is. It's a very interesting conversation that goes on about issues arising from Israel. But at the same time, I also make sure that within the semester that I invite the Palestinian ambassador and we have the same thing going. So there's a balance going on here, and it's a political thing. So where is it? Why is it? Why is it that there is this tension that goes on within Western European institutions, within American institutions, so on and so forth? And I think particularly within academia, within the UK and within Western Europe, there is this development of post-colonial studies. And post-colonial studies are very open to seeing Israel through terms as being a colonizer, as being a Western state, and there is an inbuilt sympathy for the Arab cause and for the Palestinian cause. And this comes out of post-colonialism, it comes out of Orientalism, it comes out of the idea, it manifests itself into something we'll be talking about tomorrow is BDS on the campus and how to deal with this. But there is certainly within the Middle East studies an overlap between scholarship on the one hand and activism on the other. And there is activism within the faculty that is critical of Israel. So that, you've got to deal with this. And in my view, the way in which we deal with this, and the way in which I've dealt with this, is by maintaining very carefully a very scholarly, critical, in the best sense of the word, examination of Israel, and maintaining a sort of, you can't be non-political, but you can be non-partisan, you can be a little less biased, you can be more inclusive of other people's narratives, and you can be very careful about what sort of events you put on. So, the other challenge, the other challenge then is, this is all really, I've been talking about context and how to deal with context. The other challenge is really, what is Israel Studies? It's not clear what Israel Studies is. And where's the boundary between Jewish studies and Israel Studies? And if we've got Israel Studies, where's it located within the university? And Israel Studies isn't a discipline. In my view, it's not a good idea to try and have an undergraduate course in Israel Studies. It's too narrow. So, where do you locate Israel Studies? What's the home for Israel Studies? So, the obvious idea that I come back to is that Israel Studies has a comfortable place within Jewish studies. Absolutely. And in many ways it is seen as an outcrop of Jewish studies. But Israel isn't Jewish studies. Israel is the study of the Jewish state. It's the study of the state, of which 20% isn't Jewish. It's the study of the sovereign exercise of power. Jewish studies is very much located, and I give a health warning, I'm not a scholar of Jewish studies, so you can shoot me down in flames. But in my view, Jewish studies is the study of a Jewish civilization, very much diaspora organised, diaspora located, but within that context, lacking political power, lacking political agency, and lacking a sense of security. And the tools that you come to for understanding this, very much sociological, very much cultural, very much Judaic, do not easily translate themselves into the study of Israeli society. It brings something to the study of Israeli society. Jewish studies has got an overlap in Zionism. It's got an overlap in the processes of the creation of the state. It's got an overlap in terms of understanding Jewish identity, which is an enormous issue within Israel. But to actually study Israel as a state, you need to be able to add to that the tools that we use to study other states. So there's more to it than Israel Studies, which is fantastic, which is a great thing, which enables Israel Studies, in my view, to be located and to provide something to many disciplines. My teaching has been located within international politics, international relations. But in constructing a course, and this is one module within a BA in international politics, it's not a BA in Israel Studies. So I reach out across the university for students, and the students come in from the study of sociology, because we're looking at issues of identity. The students come in from economics, because we also look at Israeli economy. Students come in from history, students come in from philosophy, students come in from Jewish studies. And we have a very mixed group of students. So the course that I had designed that looks at various aspects of Israeli society is an interdisciplinary course that brings in sociology, brings in religion, brings in history, brings in politics, brings in security. So it's an interdisciplinary thing, which means that Israel Studies can be located in many places within the academy and can speak to many different students. And it is there available as a module. If you have an interdisciplinary approach, you can bring students in from all over the place. So that my course on Israel Studies, year on year, attracted between 70 and 100 students. This was just a 10-week course, which is fantastic. The question then is what about the conflict? And when the Association of Israel Studies was formed, there's a tension. Are we teaching Israel or are we teaching the conflict? And this did come to a head between two professors, Kenneth Stein and Ian Lustig, in 2005. And they had a big argument on this, because Ian Lustig was saying that the occupation has gone on so long. Israel is all about the Israel-Palestine conflict. We don't need to be looking at Zionism anymore. This should be the focus. And Kenneth Stein argued that you cannot teach Israel only as the Israel-Palestine conflict, because Israel is not defined by the conflict. There's much more to teaching Israel than the conflict. And this tension within the teaching of Israel remains, so that when my students arrive, I say, well, look, guys, this is a course about Israel. It's not a course about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but it's a course about Israeli politics. And Israeli politics is shaped very much by the Israel-Palestine conflict. But it's not a history of the conflict. You will understand the Israel-Palestine conflict a lot better if you understand Israel, but if you want to study the Israel-Palestine conflict, go and do a course somewhere else. No problem. Now, the other course that I taught goes the other way. Is at the MA level, we designed a MA course on the politics of the Middle East. And the Israel-Palestine conflict became one module, a core module, within the politics of the Middle East. And can we just have the next slide, please? So in that location, I taught it at MA level. So what I'm trying to do is illustrate something here. Okay. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that Israel can be taught in many ways, in many places within the academy. I don't think it works as a BA. I'm not sure it works as an MA either. What it certainly works as is an element within international politics, an element within history, an element within culture. My own interest is in international politics, so that's why I located it. At the MA level, the conflict works very well. But also the final point is that in researching, Israel is a great case study. If you're teaching Israel and you want to research with other people, and you've got people working in security, work with them on Israel, history, whatever. What goes on in Israel is enormously interesting to other people. So, essentially, I'm going to finish in a moment, but this, can we go back to? Okay, that one. So that was my course on Israel politics and society. Zionism, the political system, religion, ethnicity, Arab citizens of Israel, civil military relations, political economy, the Holocaust, of course, and foreign relations. 10 weeks, bringing everything. Next slide. Politics of the Israel-Palestine conflict, dividing up the issues and working with them in a 10-week period. That also worked well. Next one. In my current research, I'm interested in critical security studies, so I'm looking at Israel and what we can understand about Israeli society in terms of security. So next slide. So, to finish off, some conclusions. What I've been trying to look at here and to bring some structure to my thinking, which has been somewhat introspective, is that I started off by looking at the emergence of Israel studies, very much in this semi-hostile environment. Now, I'm not convinced that that semi-hostile environment translates very well currently to Eastern Europe. I don't see the same degree of hostility. So I think maybe that sort of message is of interest, but it may not be the experience here. The relationship with Israel studies and identity, I think maybe that's interesting. But the context is different. Israel is being taught in India. Israel is being taught in China. I spoke to people who are teaching Israel in Jordan. Israel, particularly the study of Hebrew, has got an enormous number of students in Cairo at the moment. So, people have got different environments in which to look at this. So it's an enormous challenge. I think it's very interesting to compare different people's experiences. The one thing I can say is that, particularly coming out of Israel, is that there is an enormously interesting scholarship, and the students are very interested in what's coming out of Israel. And my final word on this has to be that this triangulation between donors, the State of Israel, and academia works well, as long as when you're dealing with Israel, you understand that you need to maintain, we need to maintain our academic credentials above all else. We've got to resist any temptation to get involved in the politics of the state. We're examining Israel in the same way as academia would examine any other state. So I've got no more sophisticated conclusions than that. I'm really interested in what you guys would have to say. And one of the reasons I've come here is to be able to talk to people and to learn from you. So that's about as much as I can say on this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for such interesting piece of information. I hope there is no one in this room who wants to shoot you, but to discuss your lecture, I hope so. Please,
I like people who
all
argue.
questions and comments are encouraged, please. Go.
Good afternoon. My name is Ewa Węgrzyn. I'm from the Institute of Jewish Studies in Krakow, in Poland. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Craig, for your very interesting lecture. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it even more because I'm teaching. Within the Institute of Jewish Studies, we have a model of one course of history of State of Israel, and I'm teaching this course, and these are also some facts that I'm trying to challenge as a lecturer in the Institute of Jewish Studies. It's for MA students. But my question is, unfortunately, tomorrow I won't be able to listen to your lecture because I'm coming back to Poland, to Krakow, to teach. Could you please say a few words, elaborate a little bit more about the BDS movement in next 10, 15 years? How, to which extent it might influence the Israel studies in academia? Okay. What is your opinion?
All right, my opinion is that the BDS movement is geographically situated. There's BDS in America, there's BDS in the UK, there's BDS in Western Europe. The whole purpose of BDS is to challenge engagement with Israel as a normal state. In my own view, I think that in the UK, I'm going to speak about the UK. My view in the UK is that the BDS in the UK has been very much, it's been held back. There was a big surge in BDS about 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But in terms of the study of Israel has made tremendous progress. And I don't see BDS within the UK as the sort of challenge. If you look at UK politics, the extent to which the Labour Party positions on Israel have been successfully challenged, there is a pushback against the idea of BDS. And again, I say that if Israel is taught in a way that is not seen as being a voice piece for the state of Israel, then I think I think the prospects are good. I don't see BDS as being the existential threat that it is sometimes painted, but I can only say that from my perspective. And it's the function of the support for the Palestinian movement. BDS it comes out of a Palestinian call for support. And BDS is a measure of support for the Palestinian movement in a particular society. And I don't, because of the traditional association of Western Europe with the Middle East and America with the Middle East, then that's a very close interest. I don't see that interest so much beyond those borders. So my view, if you want it in a nutshell, is that I think that if we translate this to the current policies of the State of Israel, I think that Israel is right to be concerned about BDS, but I think Israel is making a mistake in the extent to which it is taking offensive measures against its critics. I think it's going too far.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for the lecture. My name is Zev Khan, and I teach political studies in Bar-Ilan University in Israel, and Israeli and Jewish studies in Ariel University. So I would lovely continue this discussion concerning BDS and scientists, activists, and scholars, academics, but hopefully we will have time to do it tomorrow because I'm a discussant for your presentation.
Absolutely.
So my question is, if you please will permit me, to come back to the definition of Israel studies. What is that? Well, in principle, I agree with you that we should not discuss Israel studies as just a part of the Jewish studies, and that's it. It's definitely an interdisciplinary subject. However, when we say disciplinary, interdisciplinary, we are not in fact defining exactly what it is. At the end of the day, we're historians, political scientists, experts in comparative government, in international relations and culture studies, and so on and so forth. And it's not by chance that Israel studies, it depends on who is establishing that and who is teaching that. They're appended either to International Department, Studies Relations Department, or Oriental Studies Department, to Jewish Studies Department, or History Department, like here in the university.
Or film studies or culture.
Or field study, or whatever, or gender study, or comparative literature. It really depends. So from this point of view, we are saying what it is not, but never saying what it is. So to my mind, and I really would appreciate whether you will support or dismiss my approach, that from this point of view, define or to see Israel studies as a part of Jewish studies is much more legitimate than, for instance, to define it as the Oriental studies, like in many universities. Why it is Oriental studies? Just because in Israel we speak Hebrew, an Oriental language? Okay, it's a good idea, but whether it's so persuading. To my mind, it's much more legitimate to see it, to continue defining it, and to relate to it, and to do it as a certain part of the Jewish studies with certain reference to other subjects. And yes, to have an interdisciplinary approach rather than any other things. Of course, it's true, as you say, that in Israel, besides Jews, which are 74.4% of the population, you have other groups. None of them are Muslims, none of them are Arabs. You have about 30 different, as you know, ethnic and religious groups. But probably we could also relate to that as we have it in the diaspora. Relations between Jews and the host countries, with other ethnic and religious groups, and the same we can see in Israel as relations between Jews, who happen to be their ethnic majority, with other groups, which are ethnic and religious minorities. So I'm not going to persuade you in anything, but however, that probably could be, discussed again. Thank you.
Am I right in understanding your point that you think that Israel studies, the natural place for Israel studies is within
That's what I think, yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the idea that Israel studies is part of Jewish studies, providing that it's clearly understood that we're bringing to the study of Israel additional tools to those that are normally associated with the study of Jewish culture and history. So, as you say, bringing in other scholarship. I don't have a problem with that, and the reason I don't have a problem with that is that I think that Israel studies can be located in many places, including Jewish studies. I don't think that Israel studies should exclusively be located within Israel studies, and I'm not sure you're saying that anyway. Are you saying you're opposed to the idea of Israel studies being taken within other disciplines?
Will you raise your voice, please?
Are you saying that Israel studies should not be located in other disciplines?
No, I'm not saying that.
Exactly. So in other words, I agree with you. Because I'm not saying Israel studies shouldn't be in Jewish studies. I'm saying Israel studies can be in many places because it can be looked at from many different perspectives and bringing to it many different
But
scholarships.
you should start with something, don't you?
Say?
But you should have started with something.
It should start with
Start with something, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, I suppose, something very simple, which is that when we look at the Israeli state, we bring to it a consideration of the use of sovereign state power that requires the use of additional theoretical tools that are than those that are normally located within the traditional study of Jewish studies. It's an extra bit. And I think we would agree. I'm not arguing with you. I'm not disagreeing. We're probably going around in a circle and arriving in the same place.
Okay.
One more question, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Yuri Rashin, historian. I have maybe one question to clarify because I'm sorry I am delayed to your lecture. And we know in Ukraine actually we have a problem, how to write national history. And what is national history? The history of the land, or history of peoples of multicultural history, etc., etc., etc. And from your perspective, when actually, from your perspective, people who teach actually history of Israel in Britain, whom do you know personally probably, when history of Israel begins actually? When is it from 1948, or it's from Yeshua, or it's from Abraham Avinu, and so on and so on? So when, from your perspective, when should how it's better to write history, if you have such answer? And the second question, very briefly, you mentioned about the people who are hostile to Israeli studies in universities. We know who they are and why do they do it and so on. It's like quite understandable question, but from what arguments do they use when do they oppose to Israeli studies? Because as we know, we can teach Israeli studies from critical perspective as well, it's like, and so on. So what arguments do such people explore, use when they say this? Thank you.
Okay. Two very interesting questions, thank you. In fact, all the questions have been very interesting. It's very challenging sitting here having to deal with such insightful and difficult questions. Being asked by a historian how we teach the history of the state, when I'm not a historian, puts me in a little bit of a dynamic. Okay, I don't teach the history of Israel, so I don't know how I would go about if I was a historian teaching the history of Israel. Certainly, from a political science perspective, we look into the narratives and the myths as much as we look into the historical analysis. I mean, there is an argument for certainly Zionists, when they're talking about teaching the history of Israel, would go back to the Jewish presence in the land as being the starting point, because it establishes an entitlement of sorts. So they wouldn't miss that out. Where you start with, again, if you're talking about Jewish studies, if you're located within Jewish studies, then you're going back, as you say, further. If you're located within religious studies, you're going back further. My interest as a researcher, personally, is in contemporary issues. And I'm sure as a historian you would tell me that you cannot understand contemporary issues without understanding the history. So again, I think the answer is that we all choose our histories and we all pick out the narrative that we find informative to us. And generally, I would say that when Israel is taught, the people that I speak to who teach Israel, they start with Zionism. And they start with the experience of the Jewish diaspora, and they look at the state formation processes that inform that. And insofar as they go back further, well, you know, this is a very politicized issue. Look, for instance, at archaeology in Jerusalem. If you think that, you know, history is important, you know, whose history is important and which history is important, it's an enormously politicized choice. So I think the answer to your question as to how far you go back in the history and where you start depends on where you want to end up. Where you want to end up informs where you start from, and where you want to end up informs the things that you look at. So to an extent, it's a personalised choice. Your other question, just remind me, what was the second question?
Actually, if some people come to campus and say, do not teach Israeli studies, what argument do they use? What do they say? No. Why? Just because of propaganda of Zionism, also what argument do they say?
Their argument is not a sophisticated argument. Their argument is that teaching Israel is a political act. Their argument that treating Israel the same way as you would treat any other state is in itself a political act. It's a position. And if you take the view that Israel is an exceptional state, that Israel is an occupying state, and that Israel is undeserving of our attention, that's the argument. It's not a sophisticated argument. It's an argument that really is political activism. So this is what I was trying to say earlier on, that there is a separation between intellectual activism and intellectual scholarship. And this is crossing the line into activism. So it's like the lecturer saying, don't bother to research this, just go and protest about it. Yeah? It's quite literally, the scholars say, don't bother to research this, just protest about it. That, in a nutshell, is what is said. And how is this acceptable? It's acceptable because the belief that the activism is the right thing to do. It is not a scholarly position. I can't say it any more than that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, time is over. We need to move to the next panel. So thank you, Alan.
Thank you.